speak at 1 o'clock.
Joining us, I'm Diane Rehm. The crisis in Iraq escalates as the Islamic militants take over key cities. The Obama administration is considering direct military action. U.S. drones hit militants in Pakistan's tribal regions, and the World Cup opens in Brazil as protests there become violent. Joining me for this week's top international stories on the Friday News Roundup, Yoki Driesna of Foreign Policy, Nancy Youssef of McClatchy, and Jim Sciutto of CNN. I invite you, as always, to be part of the program. Give us a call, 800-433-8850. Send us an email to drshow@wamu.org. Follow us on Facebook or send us a tweet. Welcome to all of you. Hi, Diane.
Hi, Dan. Nice to be here.
And Jim Sciutto. It's good to have you. Welcome.
Great to be here. Thanks so much.
Talk about what's happening in Iraq and how much of the country the militants have taken over.
Well, they've taken two major cities. The second largest city in the country, in the North Mosul, as they move south from there towards Baghdad. For a time, they took Tikrit. The government claims to have taken Tikrit back, but I think it's a very fluid situation there now. They were also moving closer to Baghdad, close to, there's an American presence at Balad, which is an Iraqi military base just north of Baghdad, and the U.S. was forced to evacuate U.S. contractors from there yesterday. And keep in mind, these were contractors that were there to train up the Iraqi forces for the eventual delivery of F-16s later this year, which has been approved. So just imagine the situation, how the F-16s already been on the ground there. I mean, and that also gets to what are the administration options to respond to this? Because arming and training has been the strategy to this point. But of course, the forces in terms of responding to this threat, Iraqi forces have not performed very well.
What about Baghdad?
Well, they're eager to march on to Baghdad, but where Mosul was very easy for them to take, Baghdad will be proved to be much harder because there's a huge Shia population there that is already arming itself up for potential attack. Ayatollah Sistani, the most prominent Shia leader there, called on Shia residents to take up arms to defend their home and to defend the holy shrines in case of an imminent attack. In addition, we're hearing conflicting reports about Iranian influence showing up in Baghdad as an effort to defend the capital. So that will be much, much harder. That said, when they took Mosul just a few months ago, that was a very hard-fought battle. And the swiftness with which they took Mosul was so unexpected. The fact that they didn't confront anything, that it's really hard to know what they'll face and how they're able to mount an offensive. I think the important thing to remember is the elements, the jihadi extremist elements that we've seen in Iraq have generally fought like terrorists in the past. ISIS is different in that it's fighting in a conventional military style, and so that changes how you calculate and how the Iraqi forces know to respond.
Are we creating a whole new country, Yogi?
I mean, I think that it is to agree with what we're witnessing. We're seeing two things. One, Al-Qaeda in Africa, for a long time in northern Mali, they did hold territory. It's the first time in history that Al-Qaeda group, not the Taliban, but Al-Qaeda group, held territory. This is the second. So World War I, borders were raised, new countries were formed. World War II, borders were raised, new countries were formed. Obviously, this is not a world war, but wars do this. And what we're seeing now is that borders that have existed for decades, that were sort of artificial in the first place, are beginning to disappear. They're beginning to become sponged off, like it's like off of a map with water. It is worth talking, though, when we think about Baghdad. ISIS is very smart. They're very smart tactically, and they're very smart strategically.
Talk about what ISIS stands for.
It stands for basically it's the Islamic State in Syria, Iraq, and Al-Sham. It's the crossover group that operates inside both Syria and now increasingly in Iraq, and again has erased the border between them. In a literal sense, they made a YouTube video showing them bulldozing this earthen berm that had technically been the border, so literally and figuratively it's gone. But this group is very smart. They operate and communicate mainly by human courier, because they know that anything communications, any phone call will be tapped, so they don't use cell phones. They generally move in small numbers, so American overhead imagery is kind of useless. And they're very smart strategically. If you look at the map of Mosul, I spent about 4 months living there, and I know the city quite well. They've taken only the Sunni neighborhoods and didn't go anywhere near the Kurdish ones, because they knew if they did, the Kurds would respond. They've taken the Sunni heartland where they have support. I'd be very surprised if they moved on Baghdad. That's where they'd face a Shia line. Here, up till now, they haven't.
And what's happened to the Iraqi military in all these places, Jim?
Well, this has been a real test of the Iraqi military, and in Mosul certainly. This is it's not as well protected as Baghdad, but they had a very serious and well trained and well armed military force that ended up responding. Many of them dissolved. They dropped their uniforms, they dropped their weapons, they ran away. And this raises a real question about the administration strategy in Iraq, because the strategy has been training and equip. And this is a strategy that extends beyond Iraq to places like Libya, to Mali, and of course in 2 years' time to Afghanistan. And and there's no place where we spend more money or more years training the local forces than in Iraq. And if this is the response, it raises real questions about whether these forces can respond to the very real threat there. The other point I would just make about ISIS is that ISIS's role here, in a way, is civil war, to create these divisions along ethnic lines, and they're having some success. And I spent a lot of time in Iraq after the invasion, and particularly in those bad years, the mid-2000s, when there was an ethnic civil war going on. And to hear the Muqtada al-Sadrs, the al-Sistanis coming back supposedly to the rescue, I think is a real